Let the word go
The
forth.
challenge, the opportunity to connect. The 1960s, a time of imagination and change, a time of anger and fear. The 1960s, a pioneering program called Challenge
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen.
that looked at our connections, our divisions, through the lens of shared values.
For something real.
60 years later, we examine our divisions, our connections, our shared pains and successes in a new program called Challenge 2.0. Last week, we met two Seattle residents who have strong physical and emotional ties to the Middle East, both Israel and Gaza. This week, we continue our conversation, where they share their perceptions on the rapidly changing situation with respect to both areas, and why they emphasize that what happens in Gaza is not and will not be confined to Gaza, but will have ripple effects across the globe. So we hope you had an opportunity to watch our episode last week. Again, I'd like to introduce our two guests. We're very fortunate to have both of you with us again this week, and to continue our discussion, we have Christy Jucht, who's a surgical nurse. You've spent a lot of time over in Gaza doing volunteer work there, and Dan O'Neill, you've spent considerable time not only in that area, but in the larger Middle East as founder of Mercy Corps, and doing work considerably before that. I wonder if you could just give us a quick background of what drew you there initially and what your time has been like in the Middle East. Christy, I might begin with you.
Yeah, I was first invited in 2016 by a Seattle-based pediatric surgeon who had been affiliated with a group that went over the Palestinian Children's Relief Fund, PCRF. And she invited me along. I had been hearing about her experiences, and I was interested in going and doing some work over there. So that got me involved. And I always say, once you go to Gaza and see it firsthand, it forever changes you. And once I went on that trip, I've now been back 5 times. My last trip was in February of 2023.
And developed a lot of personal relationships.
Yeah.
Over there.
Obviously, people can't leave the area, so when you go back, you reconnect with the healthcare staff and just the locals there. They're always excited to see people come back.
And Dan, you started out, I think, on an educational program in the Middle East. Tell us what that was and how that transformed itself into the larger work you did.
Sure.
In that area.
I had been doing studies in Lausanne, Switzerland, and part of that study program was there was 3 months of study and lectures, and a lot of reading, and then the second 3 months after that would be travel, and I was a driver of a Land Rover, and I was the scout vehicle for 2 buses totaling 90 students from Switzerland, from many, many different countries. So it was like 3 months on the road and going through, all of the countries in Europe practically to get there. And then once in the Middle East, we went to Syria, went to Lebanon, and I ended up going to, and also Jordan. And so I ended up just walking on as a volunteer on a kibbutz in Israel. I just happened to stumble upon it as I was celebrating my 25th birthday on the shore of the Sea of Galilee. And I thought, well, it's a completed picture. But what I found out was there was a lot more to it. Once I lived there, went through a very major war in 1973, and didn't fully escape without injury.
What happened?
Well, there was I was working in the fields. The men had all gone off to the front lines, and so I was asked by our U.S. ambassador people if I would evacuate with them during the war, and October '73, and I had to make a decision. I said, I'm not leaving. I'm with these people, and I had many Jewish friends and lots of good relationships. So once I was there and went through the war, and then I started doing my own little traveling across Israel, hitchhiking, a lot, which they used to do safely back then, and met a lot of Palestinian folks too. And I thought, this is really complicated. And so it was an education program for me. So once Mercy Corps began, and I founded that in 1979, one of the things we started doing was doing what we called study tours, taking ministers, missionaries, editors, TV producers, magazine editorialists, theologians to study and meet the top leaders of the whole region.
Mm-hmm.
And that also, of course, the byproduct was that I got quite an education.
Yeah.
And it's really, really complex. And the multi-generational trauma was really clear for me to see during that time.
And of course, that came to a head, as it has several times, in the October 2023 attack in Israel, and then the counterattack, the retaliation attacks within Gaza. I think the larger question is, what might be the end result for Gaza? And one particular video that I think was surprising to many people came out, artificial intelligence generated, that apparently was done with the approval of President Trump. And I think we might just pause before we continue our discussion and just share that with our viewers. Let's go to that right now.
Tunnels coming to set you free, bringing the light for all to see. No more tunnels, no more fear. Trump Gaza is finally here. Trump Gaza shining bright, golden future, a brand new light. Feast and dance, the deal is done. Trump Gaza, number one. Trump Gaza, shining bright. Golden future, a brand new light. Feast and dance, the deal is done. Trump Gaza, number one.
Well, having seen that again, and I'm sure you have several times, what was your initial response to that? I guess visceral first.
I was disgusted and horrified and in disbelief. It was preposterous. It was so ludicrous. I couldn't even wrap my head around it. I really thought it was like a joke, a satire.
Mm-hmm. Dan, what about yours?
Same as with Christy, what she said. I thought it was, I was shocked when I first saw it, and once I started reading about it, it just became, to me, just another demonstration of Western ignorance. And in particular, an administration that would set something up to look like, a golden idol, an American presence with a golden idol. What does that say? It says all the wrong things. So I found it shocking and offensive.
You both have a lot of contacts over there and have continued, from what I understand, to be in contact with them. What sort of response did you hear from them? Not only their personal response, but also what that's doing in terms of our position over there as the United States, in terms of what has been held up over past years as an icon of freedom and of regard for the downtrodden. What have you heard, Dan?
I just think there's been a broad sense of disillusionment. It looks like massive destruction, by intention or by consequence. So I think that the problem is one that is so complicated, it takes professionals. True peace engagement is hard and difficult, and sometimes long, a long time in the oven before the cake is baked. So I think part of it is a discouraging kind of, whoa, why can't we stop all of this suffering? But then we need creative, committed minds on all sides to come to the table and make a better way of living for everyone.
Christy, what have you heard from your contacts and friends over there?
I mean, they think it's absolutely ridiculous, and in their mind, there's no way that they're going to leave and allow for this potential rebuilding this Riviera, like a resort style. I mean, I think they're losing even more hope and faith in the Western world. It just makes us look like we are more leaning towards Israel and this whole idea of expulsing the whole Palestinian people off their land. And my friends and I say, well, what happened to this concept of a two-state solution? I mean, it seemed like that's what we were fighting for, to get control over Hamas so that they could have a peaceful, where the Palestinians could govern their land and the Israelis, and once again they could live side by side. But it just made a mockery of the whole thing, asking people to leave. And we saw what happened in 1948 when people left. There was no ability to return. So I feel like Trump is, saying this, just dangling a carrot to get them off the land. We're going to make it better than before. You'll just see. It'll be so great you'll want to come back. And they're like, that's laughable.
Make Gaza great again.
Yeah, right. Yeah, there you go. A new hat.
As we look at that, and we'll not retravel some of the territory we covered in the past episode, but I think the latest estimate on the death toll, and that's probably inaccurate, it was something in the order of 60,000. But given the images you've seen, the rubble that exists, are there likely bodies of victims that will never be recovered? And what does that say in terms of the sensitivity of basically paving over a cemetery and building this sort of resort development?
Well, like Christy said earlier, what she said amounted to what I would call a massive desecration of a graveyard. And the implications for that, especially among Muslim populations, is just not acceptable. And 20 years from now, archaeologists are going to be finding the remains of people, probably, 100 years from now. It's just been such damage for so long, going so deep and wide, that the destruction looks almost total. From aerial shots of Gaza that I see, it looks like it's a completely leveled, region.
Christy, what's your sense on that, of this idea in an area that's been a massive area of devastation and death?
I mean, I think for both sides, Jewish Israelis and the Muslim Palestinians, I mean, getting their loved ones back and being able to give them a proper burial is important on both sides. When we're talking even like the exchange of hostages and the return of deceased people, I mean, I can't even imagine how anybody in their right mind could see that it would be okay just to level it, or maybe not even get rid of, the bodies and just build on top of it. It's horrifying. I don't know how anyone in their right mind could think that that's okay, and that people would then want to go and sit on the beach and vacation there. I mean, to me, that's horrifying.
What has been your response as we've looked at when that video came out and this proposal came out? There's been either reaction or lack of reaction on the part of U.S. faith leaders. What have your perceptions been of that, and what surprised you about that? Dan, I might ask you your response first.
Yeah, well, at the bottom of the three main faiths that we discuss periodically, the values should be very, very similar. But we see in the American evangelical Protestant world, which is large and appears to be thriving, there's a very strong sort of Christian Zionist ideology. Support Israel, right or wrong. And of course, as faith, as a Christian, I value Jesus, who was a Jew, and the Jewish traditions and history, which I've studied, very valuable and very informative, and something I would support. But now we have leftists, and we have kind of center, the center that is sort of like mainline churches, which I see a lot more faith, justice and peace, sort of ideology there.
Right.
And then there's the other extreme where, it's just fragmented and isn't unified at all.
Christy, what's been your sense as you've watched this and maybe expected to see some sort of reaction one way or the other on the part of faith leaders? What have you seen, and what impact has that had on you?
In the beginning, I felt like people were very quiet, silent almost. Maybe is not to offend different faiths, let things unfold. I saw the biggest kind of group speaking out were those in the occupied West Bank and in Bethlehem, and I even would, try and share that with people. They were very vocal. I mean, I think people forget that many Christians live in the West Bank, and so.
Yeah, what's the proportion of that? I think you mentioned that to me one time when we were just talking.
Yeah, I actually, truthfully, I don't remember what the percentage is, but, it is a religious place for Christians as well.
Right.
So we keep talking about the Jewish and the Muslims and them, but I think people don't understand that, the birthplace and Bethlehem and is in the occupied West Bank. And in order to get into those areas, you pass multiple checkpoints. And for the last 2 Christmases, it's been silent and quiet, and people that live there have been forced to leave because they thrived on tourism and groups coming through, religious groups. And I was even disappointed, I attend church, and all of a sudden every year there used to be these pilgrimages to the Holy Land, and
Right.
just quiet. It's just gone quiet.
Not existing now.
Yeah, and nobody's even responding to that or acknowledging that those places are under attack and they're no longer safe to go to. I even think when Pope Francis did try to speak out, he was immediately labeled as, he's done a flip, he's now anti-Semitic, and people are upset when before, they approved of what he was saying and his support. So
I think it's instructive. I'm glad you brought that up because I was waiting for Pope Francis to make a move.
yeah.
And it turns out that even in this health crisis which he experienced, he made a special call to a church, to a priest that he knows in Gaza, and where the hope for peace was discussed. So I think when you have people of that magnitude and that level of visibility making, a move like that, I think it was very, everything a pope does is instructive or symbolic of something deeper or bigger. And he made that call twice to that same church since, the October 7th debacle.
I want to come back to that, but we've heard so much of the AI-generated video, and we just showed that again. It's not the only plan that's out there. I think Egypt came up with a plan recently, approved by the Arab League. A number of European nations have said we'll financially support this. And that would be not to move everybody out, but to say we're going to rebuild this, we're going to take care of the humanitarian needs of that. What's your view of that, and what obstacles do you think getting that development underway as opposed to the Trump development, what obstacles would that face? Whichever one of you would like to tackle that
Why don't
first.
you take that one?
Well, I think that is the most favorable approach, the rebuilding of Gaza without displacing the people further. It's not realistic to have them to keep moving around. And then, again, they know that there might not be the ability to return afterwards. And then I believe it'll be built, if the Arab countries help, it'll be built in for the Palestinians to make a better life for them. The Western and Israeli approach is for their benefit. And, I feel, again, it's more of a land grab again. So, yeah, for me, the only option is to rebuild and have their support. They have the finances. I hope that's the way it goes.
And the Saudis have been major players in the U.S., and I think their position has been pretty clear. What influence could that have on the U.S., Dan? Do you have any sense of that?
Whatever the Saudis decide to do politically is going to have significant impact. I mean, everything that we've heard about Saudi Arabia and their influence and their power and their oil and their money, even their construction capabilities are astounding. You look at the United Arab Emirates and look at the infrastructure there, and it's shocking to see how advanced it is. So I think if you got the right players on the team and they collaborated, I think there's 2 things that have to happen: collaboration and radical empathy. Radical empathy, which in psychiatric terms is defined as the ability to feel what another person feels deeply.
Christy, do you have a sense of all the people that you know over there, of how many no longer are alive? And I know that's a tough question.
My immediate healthcare friends are still alive, but when I've asked them if they've lost family members, immediate, extended, they each can say anywhere between 20 and 30 family members. And all of them have lost their home. None of them they're all in shelters.
Yeah.
They've all lost home.
You know, the other thing that's so disturbing to me, is probably shows my, kind of what part of the living room I sit in, but is all the aid workers that have been targeted and killed. And as of last month, there were 65 international journalists that were killed. And many say that they were targeted. And there was a doctor working in a hospital who I believe he's from Europe, and I can't remember much more about the doctor himself, but he was saying, why is it that I'm seeing so many children with bullet holes right over where their heart is? He says, these people are being targeted. We've never seen these kind of injuries this consistently that are designed to be fatal. So, it's just shocking, really, to see what's going on and to hear it from those kind of folks that have been on the front lines for that long.
I've had two friends who've gone over there, and they say, it's not really discussed, but the use of these quadcopter drones. So they say it's almost desensitizing the Israeli soldiers because they're not directly coming face to face with the children or whatever. They're dropping these drones down, and the drones are firing in the face, chest, and the arms purposely. And so my friends that are in whatever functioning hospitals or pop-up clinics these kids are coming in, and it's women and children. And because those are the future generation of Palestinians. So if we eliminate the women who give birth to them and we eliminate the children, then there will be no future fighters. And then I've FaceTimed with some of them, my friends, and I've seen pictures from volunteers who've tried to bring them money or food or phones, which none of it is allowed in. They're emaciated. It's shocking to see. They were already thin, but to see that they've lost 20 to 30 pounds, like their clothes are just hanging on them. They're almost unrecognizable. Their hair is so sparse and thin.
Malnutrition.
Oh, for sure. I mean, people that are 30 look like they're 60. It's horrifying. And healthcare workers that are going in now and they're highly screened, they're not allowed. They're allowed one backpack, and one laptop, one phone, no money, no food. So they are going for the length of their mission, and they are pretty much not eating the entire time because everything is contaminated. And they donate blood when they go in. And so it's horrifying that they can't. And my friend, who's an anesthesiologist from San Francisco, was interrogated for like 6 hours in a room with like 6 soldiers around him with giant machine guns, pretending not to speak any English. And then they would yell at him, and then in the end they made him sign like this 12-page document that was all in Hebrew. He had no idea what it said. He doesn't know what he signed, and they never let him in. And out he went. And that was just at a checkpoint near the West Bank. So, that's never discussed. And that's, no aid in, nobody out. And they have survivor guilt. I mean, I don't know, I'm not.
Oh, yes.
So they come home, they're traumatized, then they go back again. Their families can't understand it. So sometimes they're not even telling their families
where they're at,
because they feel so terrible that they were allowed to leave. And when they go in, the Israelis take their phone, they program it, they put an app on it. They describe it like an Amber Alert when it goes off. So they track their movement in Gaza. When it goes off, they're required to leave, and they have to stay on a certain pathway. If they divert off of this pathway or the driver, they immediately will target the vehicle and bomb it. And they know that from the World Central Kitchen. They don't mess around with it. So they said sometimes they would be going to the hospital or clinic that literally they could probably walk to in 15, 20 minutes, but it was a 3-hour drive because of all the destruction and rubble. So it was almost like a game. They felt like the soldiers were playing with them to put them into these zones that were dangerous and full of destruction, and the roads were unsafe, to instill this sense of fear that what you're doing, so hopefully you don't come back again. So everything was to traumatize, to traumatize. They described things that when they got to the border and an aid truck would come through one at a time, they would bring it across, then they would hold it there, then they would let the people, like ransack it because there's such little supplies.
Right.
Then they would videotape it. And then they would use it as propaganda to say, like, look at the savages, look at them. They're hoarding, they're taking, they're looting their own aid. And then they would laugh. And then once people had in ran, they knew they'd let them do it so that that aid didn't get further in to Gaza. And then they would let one more truck through. And then they would do the same thing and videotape it.
Yeah.
It was crazy.
Very discouraging, and by the end of the day, you're worn out just from from what happened.
Doesn't do much for sympathy for their cause either. No. At least not among the people that are experiencing that.
Right.
No.
Christy and Dan, I thank you both so much for taking part in this conversation, and thank you for being a part of this conversation and listening in, and hope that that's touched you in some meaningful way that gives you a sense of perspective. So thank you again for joining in this episode of Challenge 2.0.